Welcome back, McFly subscribers. So this is what we're tying today. It's a zebra midge and some variations of it. I will discuss this fly and its variations later in the video, but let's go ahead and get started tying. To start, you will need a curved hook like these Risen 24/88s and a bead. I am using these Risen brass beads. By the way, if you want this to sink quickly, you can use tungsten countersunk beads instead. Usually zebra midges are tied in silver, and I'm using 2.4mm today. Use a larger bead for a larger hook and a smaller bead for a smaller hook. Place your bead and hook securely in your vise. Also, make sure the bead is the right size for the hook. Too large and it could pop off the front. This is about as large as this hook size can handle. For thread, I'm using Vivis 14/0 today in black. For a larger hook, you can use 10/0, and for a much smaller hook, use 16/0. Let's start the thread right behind the bead and snip or snap off the waist. Then make a few wraps behind the bead to build a thread dam and keep it from sliding down. For the ribbing, use silver ultra wire, and today I'm using the small size. Pull off 2 to 3 wraps of wire and use your finger to break it off. This will be enough for 4 to 5 flies. Put the wire up under the bead like so. This will stabilize the bead even further and hold it better for tying in. Tie this in directly on top of the hook with a couple tight wraps. This is a flat thread, so I'm spinning the bobbin counterclockwise to uncord it. This will cover the wire with less wraps and create a thinner, more smooth body. Tie down into the bend of the hook and go as deep as you want. Then bring your thread back to right behind the bead. Now start making open spiral wraps up the hook shank with your wire, trying to space each wrap evenly from the last. Once you reach your thread, then wrap over the wire and then under it, and over it once again to hold it tight. And then just helicopter the wire off. Make a couple wraps to cover the sharp end of the wire and then whip finish your fly. Oops, I broke off the whip finish, which means I didn't sufficiently cover the sharp piece of wire. Okay, let's whip finish again to keep this fly durable. However, this will make for a larger and more messy collar. That's okay though, the resin we will use later will cover any mistakes. So I'm re-whip finishing properly here and cutting the thread off close. Now for the head cement, I really like this Solares Ultra Thin. It's got a paintbrush in the cap for easy application, and it will cure quickly with a UV light. Paint a bit on the whip finish to secure it, and then zap it with the UV light to harden it. Okay, there's the Zebra Midge, one of the most popular flies ever created. This is a weighted fly that will get you down quickly, and the bead actually looks like an air bubble that midges use to float up to the surface when they're emerging. Okay, let's get to tying another variation of this fly. This time, we do not need a bead, but we're going to use the same hook. This will be a fly called the Black Beauty, which is basically a zebra midge but without the bead. We will do everything basically the same, so I will be speeding through most of this fly. But one thing I want to mention is, when starting the wire, you want to ensure that the wire isn't started all the way up over the hook eye. Give a hook eye length or two space. Okay, same as before, wrap down as far as you want and then come back up. But you can stop the thread where the wire was started. Then make your wraps with the wire and capture it the same way. End with your thread an eye length back from the hook eye. Now we need some dubbing. This is UV2 Fine and Dry, which I really like for this application. We will use the black today. You want to select a very small amount, since this is a tiny fly. Dub this onto your thread very tightly, making a small fine noodle. This stuff dubs on very easily, which I like for this kind of fly. Start making wraps up right behind the eye of the hook to form a round little head. And then end with your thread right behind the hook eye. Now, since we're dealing with a dubbing head, cementing the head will be difficult, so I like to paint the UV resin onto the thread before whip finishing. This will leave a fine layer and not gum up the dubbing. Okay, there is the Black Beauty, a great little fly to mimic a midge pupa. It is unweighted and great to use as a trailing fly, right behind a weighted lead. Okay, let's move on to another variation called the foam emerger. So most of this will be very similar to the fly we just tied, but we will change out the wire to something a bit lighter. I will use this extra small silver wire, as I don't want to add too much weight to this fly. Everything else in forming the body is the same though, so I'm going to fast forward through tying the body here. Now to form the foam wing on this that will look like a small air bubble. If you can get a hold of some white 1mm foam, this will be a little easier, but I will show you how to do this with the 2mm, which is more common. You will want to cut off about a 1 mm strip off the side like so, and use some longer scissors like I have here, not your normal fly tying scissors. Now you're left with a strip about 1 mm by 2 mm. We will want to cut this in half now to create two pieces that are 1 by 1. So cut the wider side in half. This can be a bit tricky, but take your time and you'll end up with this. Honestly, one side is a little bit thinner than the other, and that's probably going to happen to you as well. That's okay though. Use the thicker side for the larger flies and thinner for smaller flies. Take that strip and rest it on top of the hook shank, with the end of the foam reaching back to about the hook point mark, maybe about a third of the way down the hook shank. Tie this in with some tight wraps, and make multiple to ensure that it's held in well. Now usually you can just rip off the front and it will come off neat, but I didn't end my thread right in front there, so it ripped off kind of weird. I had to cut off the tag end. Anyway, no matter if you cut or rip it off, you'll want to cover any tag end with some wraps. Now we need that same dubbing we used on the Black Beauty. Dub in a small noodle like before and make a small dubbing ball for the head. Tie back up onto the foam wing here slightly, and then make sure you end with the bare thread right behind the hook eye. Now we will whip finish the same way by painting some UV resin onto the thread before whip finishing. Cure it in, and this foam emerger is finished. Now these aren't made to float on top, but it can sit right below the water film, or even fish behind a heavy lead fly looking like an emerging pupa bouncing off the current. Okay, one last version here. This is very similar to that foam emerger, but we're going to be using a CDC puff as the air bubble instead. This is called a CDC Emerger. Everything is tied exactly the same way as that foam emerger until we get to the CDC wing. So I'm going to fast forward through most of this. Okay, so for the wing, we will use a CDC oiler puff in white. I find if you wet the feather slightly, it will be easier to tie in. We'll also want to cut off the tip to form a nice squared edge to make this tie in easier. Tie this in directly behind the hook eye with a pinch wrap, and then pull the feather rearward to get it out of the hook eye. Then tie that down with a few tight wraps. Okay, let's form a similar dubbing head on the fly like we did with the foam wing emerger. So I found this head is not large enough for my liking, so I'm adding some more dubbing, and you can too if you need. Okay, there we go. I like that. So go ahead and whip finish with that UV resin method. Now we need to cut off the puff. So grasp the feather and angle your scissors straight up and down, cutting off the wing about at the hook point mark, making a straight perpendicular cut like so. And save that puff as you can tie a few more with it. Don't forget to cure the UV resin with your UV light, and that fly is now finished as well. This is fished the same way as the foam emerger. All these flies are very similar and tied almost exactly the same way. They are excellent midge imitations, and when you learn all these techniques, it gives you variation in your box, allowing you to fish different conditions with basically the same fly. If the midges are starting to surface, you can throw on some emergers. Whether it's the natural CDC or foam wing, you can even use a crystal flash wing. Do you want a weighted fly to get down deep, or unweighted pupa? The choice is up to you. You can even tie these in other colors like red and chartreuse, so just get creative and tie what works for you. The beauty of these flies is they're extremely easy to tie, which makes tying very small flies easy. In fact, when I used to fish the San Juan River regularly, there were many days the fish wouldn't touch flies larger than a size 28. In fact, I fished down to a size 30 before trying to elicit strikes. And here's a size 30. You can see the difference between a size 18 here. With flies that small, simplicity is a necessity. The other benefit to the simple nature of these flies is they're extremely quick to tie. You can fill a box with midges in very little time. Spend 1 hour at the vise and you can get up to 25 flies tied. Some of you might be able to tie even more in an hour. So for the month of February, I'm going to be tying varying different midge patterns, as I need to refill my midge box. Late winter and early spring is the time that I'm fishing midges a lot. Fish are still lethargic with the cold weather, so they don't want to get out and chase streamers. And fishing midges allows me to fish naturally looking forage that is very prevalent in most rivers, especially in the west. So the next few videos will be on different midge styles. Next week I will be tying this RS2 emerger, another amazing fly for fishing midge hatches. So make sure that you're subscribed and hit that bell notification to be notified for future videos. Now I have a long way to go to fill this box, but we're off to a great start here. By the way, I do sell these boxes with free shipping on Amazon. These are magnetic backed, which I find very useful for small flies like these midges. The magnet ensures wind or being clumsy doesn't knock out all of your flies. You can see I'm turning this upside down and shaking it, yet they all stay put. The other benefit to these boxes are the rounded sides, which allow me to select these extremely small size 24 midges here. Just run it up the side with your finger and it's easier to take out. Also, these are waterproof with this rubber gasket around the sides, and they securely snap shut. They're ultra thin, allowing you to fit them in most shirt pockets, or just take many boxes with you in your pack, organizing each box by fly style, like this midge box. I will link below to my Amazon storefront where I currently sell these magnetic backed and silicone backed boxes. Please check them out. You will not be disappointed. By the way, you should all check out my sponsor, Risen Fly. They made the hooks, beads, and scissors I use today, which are amazing quality for the cost. Not only are their fly tying materials great quality, but they also sell rods and reels as well, all for great prices. And best off, they're offering you all a discount just for being my subscriber. So go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout for 15% off your first order with them. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video, please hit that like button and share the video with all your fish-loving friends. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.